Okay, but let me just ask you a follow-up to a question that I asked yesterday on that relates to what you're saying. I mean, you know, Matt, I was in this room in March 2004 when Israel assassinated Sheikh Yassin. 2 months later, when they assassinated Rantisi. Probably around this town when they assassinated Moussaoui. I mean, there's a record of assassinations, and that has not gotten Israel anywhere. What we see that Hamas has gotten much stronger, Hezbollah has gotten a lot stronger. It seems that they are doing everything except looking at the cause of the problem, which is the occupation, a military occupation of a people that it's been overdue for them to be free from the yoke of occupation. Do you agree with that?
So I spoke to this in response to a nearly identical question from you yesterday, and right. I will make clear, look, obviously there is a long history of conflict in this region, and we will continue to make clear that Israel has the right and the responsibility to defend itself from terrorism. It is the same right that every country has, and every country, if it had a terrorist just across the border, a terrorist organization just across from its borders attacking it, would take action to defend itself. I don't think that is a innovative or should be even a controversial statement. But we also are very clear that we believe the long-term way to ensure stability in the region, and really the short-term way too, is the establishment of an independent Palestinian state. We made quite clear. That's been the position of the United States for some time, and it is the position of this administration.
Okay, so you agree then that Israel has an obligation to end this occupation. It's time to end this occupation and allow people to have their own freedoms, their own level of integrity, measure of integrity that, like the president.
We absolutely do want to see the establishment of an independent Palestinian state where Palestinians can choose their own future. Now, while that obviously requires some very important steps by Israel, and it requires a change of direction from the government of Israel, there are steps that would require the Palestinians to take as well.
Okay, one last question. Senator Graham, and apparently there's been much talk about this, is saying that we should take out Iran's oil facilities and so on. Is that a good idea? Would that, create, total chaos and maybe similar retaliatory for something that is really a major U.S. interest?
So we are discussing with Israel the scope and nature of their response, and I think I'll leave those discussions private. Yeah, go ahead. Come to you next, Tom. Go ahead. I'll just kind of work my way
Is the U.S. response to the attacks yesterday by Iran limited to sanctions? And if so, what sanctions are there left to levy against Iran at this point?
So we can always look to identify new ways to impose sanctions on Iran or to increase enforcement of our existing sanctions. Those are the measures that we're looking at right now. You saw it in the president's statement. That's what he made clear we, along with the G7, are considering. When we see Iran take new actions, we work with our partners to identify new ways to respond to that. And I think I should make clear, and this is clear I think from the statement the president put out, it's not just a question of U.S. sanctions, it is a question of other entities, some of which don't have as strong a sanctions regime as the U.S. has imposed, taking their own measures as well. Yeah.
Just briefly first, Israel Katz's statement this morning that Antonio Guterres would be banned from entering Israel. Do you have any response to that?
I don't find that, we don't find that step to be productive in any way.
I wanted to ask you, I mean, we're getting on to a year now from October the 7th. When you reflect on a year of US diplomacy when it comes to Israel and Gaza, how do you characterize what you have and haven't accomplished in that time?
So there have been a number of things. If you go back and look at the statements that the Secretary made and that others in the administration made in the immediate aftermath of October 7th, there were a number of lines of effort and strategic goals that we identified. One of them is to ensure that Israel has the ability to defend itself against terrorism. And we have worked hard to establish that right and to support Israel in defending itself against terrorism. Another is to ensure that humanitarian access makes it to citizens in Gaza who needed it. And now, of course, that applies to people in Lebanon as well. But we've made clear we want to see humanitarian access get into Gaza. And while that, of course, has been a very difficult process and with lots of hurdles and obstacles, I think it's through the intervention and the involvement and the hard work of the United States that we've been able to get humanitarian assistance into those in Gaza, which is not to say that this is whenever whenever I talk about this, I never want to make it sound like it is a game over, mission accomplished. It is very much not. It is an ongoing process. We were constantly having to break through new hurdles and find additional ways to get humanitarian assistance in. The other, one of the overarching goals that we identified is try to keep the conflict from spreading and really turning into an all-out regional war. And we have faced a number of days in the nearly year since October 7th where that goal seemed incredibly difficult, and the situation was incredibly fraught. And through a combination of diplomacy and deterrence, we have been able to calm tensions when they've been threatening to spiral out of control, and prevent the outbreak of an all-out regional war. And now, obviously, is one of those times where we're, again, at a very fraught moment, and we're going to continue to pursue diplomacy and deterrence to try and prevent escalation into that full conflagration.
I mean, you're very well aware of the very loud criticism there has been, particularly over humanitarian aid and on the failure to reach a ceasefire and hostage release deal. But I mean, on that final point about regional war, it feels much closer now than it has been. I mean, do you see this process and your diplomacy over the last year as a success?
So I will say, with respect to the question about all-out regional war, I was getting those same kinds of questions in April when it looked like we might be very close to a direct war between Israel and Iran. And I made clear at the time, and others in the administration made clear at the time, that while we never make any predictions about what the future is going to hold, we were going to spend all of our time working through diplomacy, through deterrence, through the relationships that we have built with our partners in the region to try and prevent an outbreak of that full regional conflict. And we were successful then, and we're continuing to pursue that today. It's not to say that tensions aren't high. Obviously, this is a region where tensions have been high going back decades. It's not something that started on October 7th. It's not something that, that started at the beginning of this administration. So I will let others pass judgment on the success of our efforts. I will say that from our standpoint, we will continue to work to try to advance those goals. And I would also say, when it comes to humanitarian, getting humanitarian assistance into Gaza, yes, of course, the results have not been sufficient. The outcomes have not been sufficient. There are things that we're trying to improve all the time. But it is because of the United States involvement that we have gotten humanitarian assistance in the first place, that we've seen it increase at various times, that we've seen it sustained, and it is through our continued involvement that we will try to address obstacles as they come up. I'll say, with respect to a ceasefire, yes, it has been a major priority of the United States to get to a ceasefire, but that requires the two parties themselves to come to the table. And there have been times when Israel has thrown up obstacles that have made it difficult, and we've been working through those and applying all the diplomacy we can to try and overcome those obstacles. And there have been times that Hamas has been the obstacle. And obviously, we don't have a lot of influence on Hamas's decision-making process. There are others that do, Iran chiefly, and it's I would hope that others in the region would step up to the plate as well. Obviously, that's not what we've seen them do.
And finally, I just wanted to put to you, Ronald Reagan's diary entry for August the 12th, 1982 describes how he phoned Prime Minister Begin of Israel and told him to stop bombing Beirut, or the US-Israel relationship would be endangered. I mean, to the accusation that you have simply not used leverage to get what you want, what do you say to that? And bearing in mind some precedents like that.
So there have been a number of times over the course of this conflict where direct U.S. intervention with the government of Israel has led them to take steps that they were not previously doing, to take steps when it comes to humanitarian access, to take steps with regards to the shape of their military operations. I'm not going to speak to all those publicly. Some of them have been reported over time. But I do think it is often simplistic to reduce the calculus of other countries, to reduce the understanding of what's happening to the bilateral relationship between any two countries. Every country in this region is a sovereign country that makes their own decisions based on their interest. That was true before October 7th. That remains true. The United States will continue to work to advance its own interests. Will continue to work to advance peace, advance stability in the region. But ultimately, all of the countries in the region, this includes Israel, this includes other countries, make their own decisions. They're responsible for their own decisions. They're responsible for the consequences of those decisions.
I mean, Reagan did stop the bombing of, Begin stopped it 20 minutes later.
Now, I think we have made clear on a number of occasions with the government of Israel what we believe, and there have been times when our intervention has led to direct action by the government of Israel. There are times when they have disagreements with us, and by the way, that was true in the Reagan administration too. There's no administration that you look back through history will tell you that they have a perfect record in influencing any other country's behavior or decision making. There are times when we make our opinion known to the government of Israel and they act on it. There are times they disagree. It's true with other countries, and that was true in other administrations, both with Israel and other countries as well. Alex, go ahead.
Thank you, Matt.
I'll keep going.
I understand you don't want to talk about sanctions, but to help us understand its scope, what is the ultimate goal, the targeted goal in it? Is it just to express your anger or to actually take away from their capability?
So I'm not going to really, you're right, I'm not going to discuss sanctions that we have not yet announced. You saw the president make the statement today that we are working with the G7 on sanctions, but our goal continues to be to hold Iran accountable, and they are one tool in our diplomatic arsenal. We'll continue to use them.